Nowadays, we don't have to indulge customers every whim. We offer them a Corton Charlemagne and Montrachet or a bottle of Vigne de l'Enfant Jésus, as it is straight from the terroir and from its vintage. All this is the result of hundreds of years of experience. We offer a product that simply is the way it is. We don't offer whatever wine happens to be in fashion in any given year, and this is typical of our business because we want to serve as a point of reference, not as a product of fashion.
Welcome to Montrachet, the holy of holies of Bouchard, Père et Fils. Montrachet is a name that fires the imagination. The big day for the wine harvest has arrived at last. A perfect balance is struck between sweetness and acidity. Maturity is optimal. There are a few shivers of excitement before the grape picking begins.
We're going to harvest all the grapes from the south-facing vineyards, the most golden ones. These here, for example, these are very golden. And as for the grapes from the north-facing vineyards, like this bunch of grapes here, we're going to wait and pick them in a few days. Because, after all, this will make a difference of a few tenths of degrees. In 4 or 5 days, or even more, depending on the weather, we'll be back to pick the grapes. The vineyard deserves it. The price of the bottle deserves it. This nectar enables us to customize the wine, if you will. This is not ready-to-wear we're talking about. It's haute couture.
Indeed, there is a sense of detail and precision that speaks volumes about the level of quality comparable to the level in haute couture. And to attain perfection, new facilities have been built, the Saint-Vincent fermentation room. This is where all the grapes from the 130 hectares owned by Bouchard, Père et Fils will be sorted and selected. This is where cutting-edge technology blends with centuries of tradition.
Just having top-quality grapes from the best wine-growing soils doesn't mean you're going to make a fine wine. Once this grape has been picked, great care must be taken to transform it into a fine wine. There are many mistakes that have to be avoided in order to steer clear of catastrophes. It's just the same as for a chef who, with the best vegetables, meat or fish, can serve up a dreadful meal.
Here it's a bit like a cathedral, where everything is designed with the aim of letting the wine flourish, with 100 tanks for the reds and 120 for the whites. Each vintage matures at its own pace. We definitely don't want to rush things along. This is another example of the customized work we do.
Grand Cru Corton is not produced with the same exact equipment as a Clos Vougeot or a Vigne de l'Enfant Jésus. We absolutely have to choose our tools carefully, in exactly the same way that a chef chooses his saucepans to make a given dish.
It took 5 years of work and preparation to create the Saint-Vincent fermentation room. Perfect harmony was sought between old, new, wood and stainless steel, with the sole objective of progressing continually, but certainly without ever changing the nature of the wine.
The main change with this type of facility is that now there is no such thing as a minor vintage. Before, we were very dependent, after all, on the weather, on the quality of the grapes we picked. Now, thanks to systematic harvest sorting, temperature control, high-quality pressing, and a perfectly controlled aging process, we'll be able to produce wines that are truly worthy of their terroir. This will mean that even in minor vintages, we'll produce wines that epitomize Burgundy wine for our consumers and our customers, and this is an advantage our parents didn't have.
Montrachet, Pommard, Meursault and Corton. These all form a mosaic that commands respect. From subtle variations of the soil to the pruning of the vine, daily care is required, because a fine vintage is never the result of chance.
Each vine is unique, and each year, each vintage is different. Of course, this variety has contributed to all the experience and knowledge that we have built up over the centuries at Bouchard. This tailored approach is vital to successfully adapting the wine-growing method to each vineyard and to the weather conditions of any given year, so as to overlook no detail.
Each plot has its own health record to ensure that the expression of multiple terroirs survive through time in the wine. We do not produce wine that doesn't live up to its promises or overbearing, over-concentrated wines. To make a fine wine, the vine has to suffer some, but not too much.
Indeed, we have to prune every day in order to ensure that the vine will grow enough leaves so that it will last. However, we have to be careful not to kill it. We prune it just the right amount so that it will not only grow leaves but also its fruit, the grapes, which we will use to produce wine.
And to fully understand the terroir, we have to look back to the past humbly and pay tribute to our ancestors. This is why we have immortalized heroes of the past on the facade of the fermentation room. There is Charlemagne, who according to legend owned vineyards on the hills of Courton, and the Cistercian monks, to whom we owe everything. They marked out the vineyard plots and invented everything. Philippe le Hardy was the one who introduced Pinot Noir in the place of Gamay. And then there is Philippe le Bon, who reorganized the vineyard plots in the 14th century, or Louis XI, who annexed Burgundy to the French royal domain.
Above all else, we must destroy nothing. We have the good fortune of being preceded by many generations who have taught us their craft and left a collection of old vintages that we are lucky to be able to taste and on which we base our work. But most of all, we must erase nothing of what came before us. We have a heritage, a history, and we're duty-bound to safeguard it.
And don't forget Olivier de Serres, the agricultural scientist, who well before anyone else came up with the appellation d'origine concept, or Pasteur, who in the 19th century discovered the biological mechanism of fermentation. And then there are all the unsung heroes throughout the centuries, the wine growers who dedicated their bodies and souls to wine, and the cellar masters who had the obsession of producing a fine wine that was loyal to the terroir, but they knew that nature always reigns supreme.
The latest science demonstrates that to produce a fine vintage successfully, the vine requires ideal conditions for growth, that is to say, water and sunlight during the entire vegetation phase through to the blossoming stage. And then, when the grape begins to form, the vine needs to start suffering a little bit. It needs to be a little thirsty so that it will spend all its reserves on forming its grapes rather than on growing. But nature always has the last word.
The past should be respected without being stuck in it. Modernize and make investments without ever changing the nature of the wine. Bouchard, Père et Fils are committed to progressing and moving forward while relying on the experience of the predecessors. But owning the best equipment is not enough. The most important thing is to have a team of employees who are passionate about their work.
People must be top professionals in terms of using wine growing techniques, knowing the terroir and the winemaking process and paying close attention to all the details that go into producing wine. If you don't have an exceptional team, there will always be some small detail that won't go well. And at the end of the day, you will supply the customer with a substandard product. We cannot allow ourselves to make mistakes. We must satisfy 100% of our customers. For us, just 1% of disappointed wine lovers is a real disaster.
10 meters underground, there are 4,500 casks waiting for their day. This is truly a collection of treasures, each of which lives out its life in silence. But maturing a wine requires great care. We have to be attentive to these prestigious vintages because the secret lies in the nuances and the assemblage or blending of the wine.
Skillful blending is really what we focus on now. The casks provide complexity. What we seek above all else is the overall complexity of the wine. The terroir is part of this aspect. Hints of it come through in the grape. We build complexity through the winemaking process, but also through the maturing process. The cask is certainly a key element. If you take 10 casks, each one will have its own unique identity. Often the most complex blend is the most interesting one.
Nearby, in the castle of Beaune, there is a magical wine cellar where time seems to have stopped. There are 5,000 bottles here from the 19th century. This is a priceless collection, embodying the spirit of Bouchard, Père et Fils, a winery that is committed to preserving its heritage.
It took hundreds of years to identify the terroir of Burgundy. It took hundreds of years to improve wine growing techniques, so we're going to have to be extremely patient and gradually build up knowledge and observations. We'll need a great deal of patience and tenacity because things go differently from one year to the next. Indeed, one of the cornerstones of our business is knowing how to use time to our advantage. You know, being in this business is something like being a forest ranger. A forest ranger cuts down trees that he didn't plant and plants trees that he will not cut down. Well, vineyards are quite similar to this. We plant vineyards that our successors will use, and we currently use vineyards that our predecessors planted. It's the same for wine. In this wine cellar, there are wine collections dating back to the 19th century. We didn't make these wines, but we're enjoying them now. Our friends drink them with a great deal of pleasure. We add to the collection, and I hope that in 50 or maybe 100 years, people will say that the wines produced by Bouchard at the beginning of the 21st century were truly fine wines, because ultimately all of us will fade with time.